欢迎收看《家国纵横》，我是康凯。联邦保守党新党魁的选举在下个月底揭晓，候选人之一的奥图较早前接受了本台的专访，谈到了他的竞选政纲。如果当选的话，他未来的施政理念又是什么呢？
On Zoom with me, Conservative Leadership candidate Mr. Aaron O'Toole. Welcome to our interview.
Great to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. Aaron, can I start with asking, you started the campaign as an underdog, and now you have endorsement of more conservative electives. Now, why is the Conservative Party leadership so important?
It's so important because Canada has to get back on track. Justin Trudeau has been very dangerous to Canada. He's made our communities less safe. He's making Canadians poorer. We have massive debt and deficit. He's going to be raising taxes, and Canada's reputation is in tatters around the world. We look to the imprisonment of 2 Canadians in China, the dispute with India after the Prime Minister's trip there. Canada needs a real leader, and I'm the only Conservative that's in the House of Commons now as an MP that can defeat Justin Trudeau. I'm in the Greater Toronto area. I've won 3 times. I'm the only one that can hold Trudeau to account in September and win. That's why we've gone from underdog to the person that's going to win.
Aaron, can you give us a few points on your strengths and what are your stronger parts comparing to your opponents?
Well, I've got the most experience. I served 12 years as an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces. I was in our military, and I lived and served across this great country. And my Sea King helicopter crew, we sailed with the Navy. And so I represented Canada with the Navy overseas. I then became a corporate lawyer, and I worked for 2 large law firms in the private sector. And for 5 years, I worked for Procter & Gamble as their lawyer in Canada, one of the world's largest companies. I worked on intellectual property, environment, and trade issues. Then I was promoted by Stephen Harper to be his last cabinet minister once I became an MP. I'd only been in politics 3 years, but I earned my place in cabinet, and I turned around a department that was in crisis. So I've got the most experience. I've got a seat in the House of Commons. I've won 3 times in the Toronto area. I speak French, and I'm ready to win. I'm the only candidate that is like that, and that's why I need Conservatives in our party members to put me number 1 on their ballot.
I see. When I'm looking at the polls recently, especially during the coronavirus season, the poll saying that the Trudeau government's support is not very low. How do you plan to defeat the Trudeau government if you were elected to be the leader of the Conservative Party?
Well, the reason the polls show that is Justin Trudeau has attacked our democracy. The Parliament of Canada has not been sitting regularly since February. It is a crisis, and instead of having democracy help our crisis, Justin Trudeau tried to eliminate democracy. He has spent $343 billion in 5 months with no oversight, no review, and we see the We Charity scandal. We see the Liberals already giving tens of millions of dollars without competition to their friends and their insiders. The Prime Minister has 3 ethics investigations over his time against him. There's corruption in the Liberal government. There's incompetence in the Liberal government. And once Parliament goes back in September, you will see their poll numbers go down. And Peter MacKay is not a member of Parliament. Leslyn Lewis is not a member of Parliament. They won't be in the House in September. I am. I will win, and I will make sure we hold Trudeau to account.
You did mention We Charity, and I want to go into that. $282,000 for speeches, $900 million for student grant through that charity. What do you want to say about that?
It is the worst scandal I've seen in Canadian history because Trudeau, in the middle of a pandemic, with no debate, no parliamentary oversight, he proposed a program of almost $1 billion to pay volunteers. Now, when your listeners or your viewers volunteer in their community with their church or their Rotary Club or with their neighbors, no one expects to be paid. You're doing that out of altruism, out of good faith, out of your religious faith. Justin Trudeau proposed a program to pay volunteers And then rather than having the government run it, he asked his charity friends and supporters to run it. I think we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to have Justin Trudeau testify. We need the RCMP to look into whether there was any criminality in relation to this crisis. I think it's one of the worst I've ever seen because it took place when Trudeau was not allowing Parliament to sit normally.
Right. In your campaign, you said you want to rebuild Canada, and we need a professional to do it. What do you mean by that?
Well, Justin Trudeau has never really held a job in his life. He's bounced around. He was born into great privilege. He was the oldest son of the prime minister. He feels he's entitled to be the prime minister. He hasn't earned it. And that's why he called years ago small business owners, he called them tax cheats. Whereas I view small business owners, particularly new Canadians from the Chinese Canadian community who start businesses, who work for a small business, we need them to succeed. And many of the COVID programs the Liberals created excluded small businesses. Many didn't get the rent subsidy. Many didn't get the business loan. Many of them are burning through their personal savings. I have a plan to save small business by giving them those loans, by helping them restructure, and by encouraging them through a tax benefit to hire more people. We need small business to survive and be the backbone of our economy in the big cities and the small towns of the country.
Thanks. Good to know that you appreciate the Chinese community here. And policy-wise, if you were to be PM, how about businesses, pipelines, free speech? And one of the things that we're really concerned about, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the relationship with our country, Canada. Can you say something about that?
Yes, well, there's been no stronger voice standing up for Hong Kong, standing up for minorities and free speech in China, in Taiwan, in other places than me in the last few years. 2 years ago, I asked Justin Trudeau in the House of Commons why Taiwan was being excluded from the World Health Organization's pandemic planning. I asked 2 years ago why many of these things were happening. Trudeau ignored it, and Trudeau has actually tried to curry favor with the Communist Party of China, and we've seen the result. Our citizens in jail, our trade disrupted, and our friends, whether in Hong Kong, where there's 300,000 Canadians, or in Taiwan or across the region, continually being pushed aside by China. I created a parliamentary oversight committee for Canada-China to take over the failed policy of Justin Trudeau. I'm also a principled true blue conservative. I stand up for free speech. I stand up for values including religious freedom. We need someone who's principled to take the country back from Justin Trudeau and to work with our allies to constrain the bad actions from the Communist Party of China when it comes to trade, when it comes to Hong Kong, when it comes to the Uyghurs and human rights around the world. I will get it done. I've got a very detailed plan.
And in your campaign, you said you want to make Canada self-reliant. How are we going to do that?
Well, we need to make sure that we work on having our domestic ability to manufacture masks and PPE in case we see a second wave of COVID-19. We likely will. I want to see more self-sufficiency in food production and in energy. So that means we will have to work domestically on bringing some manufacturing back to Canada, using the trade rules, or potentially even using tariffs against countries like Venezuela, China, these sorts of things. And we have to work with our allies, especially the United States, Australia, and the UK, to rebalance global trade and to bring back some critical manufacturing, support steel industry and aluminum industry, which have been suffering from Chinese trade disruption. There's a detailed plan I have on my website at aaronotoole.ca.
Talk about trade and economy. Debt has always been a problem for our country. 343 billion of deficit and over 1 trillion of debt. What are your plans to get Canada back on track?
Part of my Rebuilding Canada plan will save small business, as I mentioned, get our private sector working, including building pipelines, supporting the resource sector, and we have to have a plan back to balance while launching the economy. With the debt and deficit we're dealing with Justin Trudeau, that plan back to balance will likely be an 8 to 10-year plan because I want to do it while keeping taxes low. The Liberals, Justin Trudeau, is going to raise your taxes. It's only the Conservatives that will keep taxes low, get spending under control, and make sure families have a job to go to. The best thing for our economy is to have as many people working as possible. It's good for the country. It's good for the family if the mom or dad can work.
Thanks. Going back to COVID-19, although we're doing a bit better than the US, but our LTCs, our elderly community, really suffered from the pandemic. What would you do differently if you were the Prime Minister of Canada right now?
Well, I wouldn't have had the cases come into Canada. In late January, the Conservatives, we asked for flights to be stopped between parts of China, Iran, and later Italy. We let way too many cases in. Justin Trudeau and Minister of Health, Haiju, they were telling people in mid-March that there was nothing to worry about, no border restrictions, no quarantine needed. And I will tell you, I was traveling the country and speaking to members of the Chinese Canadian community in Markham, Toronto, British Columbia. Many of them were warning me about the need to have some travel restrictions. So the Trudeau government ignored many voices, healthcare voices, many voices from the Chinese Canadian community. If they had listened, we would have had fewer cases, fewer outbreaks. They were slow on both the health response and they were slow with the economic response. I will not be slow. I will put Canada first and make sure the well-being and health and success of our people is job number one.
All right. Lastly, we want to ask, do you think there will be a fall election? And are you going to be ready for it when it comes, when you become the leader?
Yes, there is a very strong chance of a fall election. The WE scandal, Trudeau could be called to testify. How many more scandals are in that $343 billion that were spent in 5 months with no oversight? We think the Liberals will want to go to the polls before people get down to seeing what they actually did. And now the Bloc Québécois, one of the parties in Ottawa, is not supporting Justin Trudeau anymore. So I'm the only candidate in this race ready for an election. I'm a member of Parliament now. The two other main competitors I'm running against are not in the House of Commons. If we don't have a leader in the House in September to hold Trudeau to account, we will not win the next election. I'm the only one that can do that. And that's why for Conservatives, I need them to put Erin O'Toole number one on their ballot.
Thank you very much, Aaron. That's the time we have for today, and we wish you the best on your campaign. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, and best wishes of health to all your viewers.
Thank you very much. Take care.
本期的节目就是这样。各位观众，如果想重温以上内容的话，可以登录城市电视的网站，点击节目重温当中家国纵横的链接就可以了。我是康凯，下期节目再会。